And you can just start by taking in a few deep breaths, because the breath is a very useful tool with which to anchor yourself into the present moment. And you'll notice that when you're tense, when you're worried, you completely forget about the breath. Your breath is shallow, sometimes quite fast. And sometimes just bringing your attention back to your breath and slowing it down, taking in as much air as you can. And that's what yawns are usually about, reminding us that we need a little bit more oxygen. So just breathing in as deeply as you can, breathing out as slowly and as gently. And then landing on these seats and these chairs, arriving into this practice, because it's quite obvious. Some of us have been at work, some of us have been on the internet, we've been reading newspapers, we've been reading our books, we've been stimulating our minds. And that's not a bad thing. But now the time has arrived to simply step back and let the mind continue moving, but we will see if we can stop moving with the mind. And we simply do that by tapping into the present moment, because soon, if you haven't already discovered it, you will find that the mind exists primarily in the past or in the future. And even when you think you're aligned into the present moment, the test to know if you are fully aligned into the present moment is to notice if you are complaining about anything about this present moment. Is there anything that you're complaining about? A sensation, a sound, perhaps even your bank statement your bank balance that seems to follow you wherever you go. But in this moment, were you to release the past? Were you to release the future? You would have nothing to compare this present moment against. And so your bank balance is your bank balance. It cannot be too little, it cannot be too much, because you have lost the need to or the ability to compare it against anything else. So whatever it is perfect. The sensation that you experience within your body that you may be defining as pain or discomfort, it can only be a pain or discomfort if it is compared against some standard. And so you're going to begin getting glimpses into how the releasing of the past brings us into a space of stillness and peace. And here comes the bell. to help us in this process, to help us arrive. Your body resting on the chair or the cushion, the two surfaces in contact with each other, your body and that cushion underneath you. Your breath, which is simply the interaction between air molecules and the cells within your nasal passage, around the rims of your nostrils. And remind yourself that my voice during this practice is only here to guide you back into those gaps of silence in between the sounds emanating from my vocal cords. My voice is simply there to guide you back into that silence behind every sound. For you to hold on to once you find yourself drifting away, carried by thought. A very useful way in which to begin today's practice is to breathe in a new beginning. So that you enter into this practice as a beginner, in humility, in emptiness, an empty cup waiting to be filled, as someone who does not know a, one way in which to better understand this new beginning, which can serve us so well all through life, is the story of the teacher and the student, the scholar. And let's pretend that each and every one of us here is the scholar. We've read many books, we've been to many teachers. Some of us have been practicing meditation for many, many years. And we've developed images and ideas as to what a meditation should be like. In fact, we've even read what enlightened teachers experience. Words such as detachment, stillness, peace, consciousness, they all seem to arise, but they're simply sounds which describe the undescribable. And this scholar, he arrives with all of his books. He arrives in front of the monk, a very simple man. And waiting to begin a debate, impatient to begin discussions about meditation, about the meaning of life, about stillness, about enlightenment. And the teacher, many of you know this story, the teacher offers him, says, "Before we begin, let us have tea." And he sits down, and the teacher prepares 2 cups, and then he begins pouring tea, and he fills the cup to the top. And he doesn't stop pouring, and he pours and he pours and he pours, and the tea begins spilling onto the table, onto the floor. And the scholar, not wanting to disrespect the master, remains silent until he can take it no longer. The hot tea soiling his clothes. And then he says, "Master, stop, it's full. It is full. You must stop pouring." And the master says, "This is what you are like. You have entered into my little hut, so full, already believing yourself to know. This is a practice where you enter into free of everything that you know, with an understanding that everything that you know sits within your mind. Everything that you remember, everything that you analyze, that you calculate, exists within the mind. And this is a practice of moving beyond the mind. And it begins with an empty mind. And we don't really have any hope of emptying the mind. But the next best thing is tapping into the beginner's mind, which is simply being here, visualizing yourself as a young child. A young child who's discovering the world for the first time with curiosity, with interest, not knowing up from down, left from right, knowing only what is relevant, and maybe even learning that during this practice, picking it up for the first time, how to sit and how to breathe. So let's begin by simply releasing everything you know about your posture, releasing everything you know about breathing. Acknowledging that this process called breathing, it's always happened naturally. It's not something we consciously need to do. And then gradually, starting off with the direction of the breath, let the intake of breath that is either happening or about to happen be the first breath. What would breath feel like if it were delicious? Feel it filling up your nostrils. Feel it moving through the bend, downwards through the windpipe and into the lungs. Filling up your lungs pushing against the rib cage pushing against chest muscles. Making its way down into the stomach. Because in many ways, this is how we understand this practice. It's about using the mind, but only insofar as it is relevant to the present moment. And the breath, we often start with the breath because the breath unfolds whether you are walking, whether you are cooking, whether you are sleeping, whether you are playing, working. It's always there. Something that's always there to return back to when you find yourself being carried away by the stories. You may have found peace in previous practices. You may have found previous practices turbulent and difficult. If you find yourself being attached to the peace and the stillness of past practices, you may find yourself disappointed today. And if you find yourself attached to the turbulent practices of the past, you may find yourself entering into today's practice concerned, worried, wondering how it's going to be. But if you were to release all of the past practices, whatever you discover, whatever you experience, turns into something that is perfect in every way, the way it was always meant to be. And you will find this to be more pronounced as you arrive more completely into the present moment, simply because space begins to appear between that who you truly are and the mind. If you can start seeing the mind as this space begins to appear, you begin to develop some objectivity, the ability to observe the mind, recognize what it truly is. It's a little bit like a computer program. And it's had many programmers over the years. Some of these programmers were our parents, our guardians, the schools we went to with the teachers and the curriculum, or every movie, every magazine, every book, every organization and political party we've ever belonged to, programmers who have added to that program that is now running. A program that is literally running, constantly moving, constantly running. And we call that the momentum of the mind. And so don't be alarmed when you notice the mind moving, because that's exactly what it's supposed to be doing. But as you step into the present moment using your breath, your body, sounds arising at this moment, the sense of sight even, because for most of us, our eyes are closed. And usually, if you notice, if you look at the mind associates the eyes being closed with sleep. But can you notice how awake you feel? Even if it's just pure frustration because of the mind and its movements, awake, alert, more alert than possibly ever before. And they call this mindfulness because it's where you rise above the mind, which is somewhat different from sleep, because in sleep, you move below the mind. So you dream, lots of things happen, but you're not really very aware of what's going on. It's good, it gives you rest, it allows you to slow the momentum of the mind down, which is why sleep is so important to us. But here, we rise above the mind. Breathe in, and as the breath enters in through your nostrils and moves through your nasal passage, feel the way in which the breath moves upward. And with the in-breath, visualize yourself rising above this stream called the thought stream. And it's almost as though you are panning upward, like in one of those Google Map apps where you move higher and higher and higher, where you can see your past and you can see a future where everything turns out perfectly. Everything works out. It always does. Because in your past, you can see many of the challenges, many of the pains that you have been through. But look where you are right now. You're in a comfortable room. You're well fed. You've joined in a practice with like-minded beings. And I can't speak for you, but there are a lot of things going right in your life in order for you to be here. Which means you made it through all of those challenges. There was much suffering, but you're beginning to recognize that you didn't really need to suffer because it all brought you to this present moment. And this level of witnessing allows you to move above the mind where all of the suffering takes place. The suffering happens through identification with the mind, which is constantly running, constantly running. And now it's almost as though it was, I don't know how many of you run, but you pass the point of tiredness and you rise above the mind and the thought stream and you rest. You breathe in deeply. You breathe out slowly. No longer running with the mind, but entering into a space of stillness. And as you look down at the mind, it's where you see anger and fear and stress and wanting to be somewhere else, the future, comparing the present moment against some moment in the past or some perceived future. But everything's just feels so much more quieter, so much more peaceful as you watch it from above, giving the stream permission to flow. This is a practice of discovering this new relationship with the mind, the way it was always meant to be. And as the stream flows underneath you, you see different thoughts, some of hope, some of optimism, some of despair, some of worry. You fixate, you focus, you choose which thoughts will serve you and which ones will not, releasing those that no longer serve you. What does this new relationship with the mind feel like? Still at the maps application, where you pan upward, where you see the source, where you see the end, where you see the banks of the stream to the right and the left. All of this vegetation, this vast landscape, representing a kindness that is beyond anything you could ever comprehend with the mind. It is a kindness simply because it taps into that very source of who each and every one of us is. The very source of life itself. That which keeps our hearts beating and our lungs breathing. In this present moment, each and every one of us, our lungs breathing, our hearts beating, our blood flowing. All of us sharing the present moment, not only with each other, but with every tree, every wild animal, every star in the sky, including our sun, with the solar flares that are emanating at this moment. Every butterfly and every bird, just taking it in and not quite using the mind to comprehend this, simply experiencing our present moment. Recognizing how together it is only together that we complete this tapestry called life. Each color, a crucial part of this tapestry, this painting, this piece of art called life. Our role, far more important than we could ever imagine. The very reason we empty our cups and enter into this practice as beginners, experiencing for the first time the only moment, this new relationship with our mind, a new relationship so deeply grounded in a space that is vast, limitless, yet still able to observe the tiny stream as we blend into this space. that not only reaches the deepest valleys and those gaps in between the leaves of the trees and the blades of the grass, but surrounds every star system, every planet, all having their own present moment, completing this tapestry. If you can use the word completing, because it goes on and on and on beyond the confines of the tiny little stream called the mind, which cannot even comprehend the number of grains of sand that sit on this planet called Earth. The stars out there, beyond these numbers, and therefore another reason to release the mind as we simply open ourselves to the possibilities of redefining kindness and vastness and wisdom. And so, this simple act of sitting and breathing, perhaps more significant than we would have ever imagined. Let us define sitting through our experience. Just as the star experiences its solar flare, just as the meteor experiences its velocity and its direction, the one aspect we can tap into is our own experience. And at this particular moment, this experience involves sitting, breathing. Start with your spinal column. Just find your spinal column. Can you feel the way in which the vertebrae rest, one on top of the other, how they stack, forming an arch from your lower back into your upper back? The spinal column forming the very core of our bodies, almost like a frame. How the top end connects to the base of the skull, how the tail end connects itself to the pelvic bone, stretching the spinal column, the top end upward, the tail end downward. so that you may experience this posture through your spinal column. And at the top end of the spinal column, the way in which the spinal column through the neck supports the head, how the spinal column is assisted by various muscles around the neck that keep your head in its position. Are there any of these muscles that you can relax and release and loosen so that this exercise of keeping the head upright turns into one of balance, one of simply keeping the head balanced with less effort on the part of the neck. And maybe at the same time, relaxing the skin around your head. Initially starting with the back of the head, just the scalp, the skin loosening, and the sides, and the top of the crown, and the facial muscles coated by the skin, all loosening, finding ease, comfort. Are you beginning to experience through your skin where it is that your head is located in relation to the spinal column? It's the top end, isn't it? Notice how interesting this exercise is with the eyes closed, where there are no mirrors, where it becomes one of experience, pure experience, interaction between skin and air, interaction between skin and muscle, interaction between muscle, nerves, and bone. And then you find that region within your skull where the brain sits, discovering what an ingenious design this was, where the skull, that bone, protects the brain, it protects the eyes and all of the delicate nerves within the ears, the tiny little bones, the gums, the mouth, the tongue, protected by this shell. And this is more than just a relaxation. As you move through these particular body parts, as you release tension, as you release tightness, you surrender your bodies back to that which we have always referred to as the body's own intelligence, the immune system. where the chemicals within the brain, they begin to balance themselves. I think there is the pineal gland within the brain where incredible things happen. And we release an intention that this particular region, which sits pretty much in the middle of the brain, maybe a bit towards the lower part, releases the perfect hormones, chemicals that brings our spinal column back into balance. Our cells, our bodies, into a deeper state of just being and allowing the immune system to unfold naturally. Our only task to stand aside and observe. Our only task to allow. And one thing you will begin to also discover is that as you tap into the present moment, you stop the aging process, which is why you hear of many yogis sometimes living for hundreds of years, and of course, Reverend Desmond Tutu, and more recently, Thich Nhat Hanh in their 90s, yet fully active, full of smiles, full of energy. Because every single cell within the body enters into a space outside and beyond of time. The chest, the shoulders, the stomach, the whole upper body with all of its organs, the heart pumping, the lungs extracting precious oxygen from the air that is taken in, the stomach digesting and extracting the essence of the food that we consume. Our task to simply observe, allow, sit, breathe, tap into the present moment. What could be more important than the present moment? The pelvic region, the legs, the calves, the knees, the arms with the elbows, the wrist, the fingers. Visualizing your whole body filled with light, the, the light of awareness, the light of consciousness, which is how many teachers describe consciousness as. Perhaps it may be simply because light is the very source of life on this planet. Perhaps it's so much more. But light moving through every cell within the body, visualizing your whole body with its posture now as a body of light, brighter than the sun, experiencing its own present moment. And we fill this light with qualities that we have read of or listened to from our teachers, the light of being, the light of kindness, of forgiveness, of balance, of wisdom, of ease, of comfort, of a comfortable warmth. And once it's reached the tips of your fingers and the fingernails, once it's reached your toes and the soles of your feet and your crown and your ears and your eyes and your arms, allowing this bell to dissolve your body so that this light, just like the light from the sun, spreads into every corner of the space that your body now occupies, and the whole room filled with this light of kindness. Moving through the atoms and molecules that make up the bricks, cement, windows and doors, bathing the streets outside of the building within which you live, reaching every human being, every animal, every insect, every bird, blending into the light of the sun. And with that, releasing the need to distinguish between human and animal, between animate and inanimate, releasing the need to distinguish between weed and flower. This light reaching all equally, nourishing, and bringing this quality of kindness and ease and comfort and all else that you would like to infuse into this light, so that it simply becomes an experience of oneness, experiencing yourself as the blade of grass with its present moment, experiencing yourself as the tree with its present moment, and the bird and the butterfly, and the postman, and the man or the woman lying in a sleeping bag under the bridge. Releasing an intention that with this light, may this light bring food, shelter, warmth, comfort, company, kindness, good health, balance to all who are touched by this light, which is pure, unconditional, that does not distinguish, that is giving, that is allowing, that is receiving, so that we may open ourselves to all of these qualities, so that we may receive this kindness, this ease, this stillness, this knowing, this wisdom, as we begin seeing every cell within our body as indistinguishable from all of these seemingly different life forms that we share this planet with. Dissolving into each other. And now the final bell, so that we may begin the true practice. Where we bring this kindness, this allowing, this stillness, as we watch the world unfold before us from moment to moment and breath to breath. And we remember, as I was speaking to Danielle a few moments ago, and over the weekend, Julie Thich Nhat Hanh, who just left his body, left his form over the weekend. But like the light that we visualized, he simply moved beyond his form into the hearts of each and every one of us here. And as I mentioned to Julie, we did not lose, we gained. We remember some of his most profound teachings, how during the Vietnam War between the North and the South, he would not take sides. He would not side with the North nor with the South, so that he could serve both. Many of his monks paid the price of distrust, but he would not be the mind that took sides. He moved beyond the mind so that he may simply be kindness. He stood against injustice, unjust laws, never violently, always in peace. When the country known as Singapore was sending boats back into the sea where many people were drowning, he moved beyond their laws so that he could serve them, imprisoned. But through his kindness, his gentle speech, negotiated, sometimes smuggled, and saved countless lives. And so this is a practice where, when we speak of the present moment, it does not imply accepting the injustices in our lives, but simply moving beyond judgment and tapping into the core of our very being, which is kindness, and acting irrespective. And we thank him for his teachings, and we thank him for being with us and sharing his light with us during today's practice. And as that old prayer goes, lead me from darkness to light, I think it's from ignorance to knowing, and from death to immortality. Please feel free to unmute yourselves. It's a pleasure.